Hi, this is Elizabeth at craftsbyhappystamper.com. Thanks for joining me today. This card is part of the One Stamp at a Time uh, blog hop. We each did everybody in the hop did a card and a project, and this is the card that I made for you all. I'm going to show you how I made it. It's just a bunch, it's really easy, but it's a bunch of layers. So I started with a 4¼ by 11 white card base. I used the Thick Whisper white cardstock and I scored it at 5.5. And then I used a mint macaroon for the first layer, which was 3¾ by 5. And then I decided, you could see me on the right trying to figure out if I like how it looks because I'm making it up as I go along. But the next I decided to do another white piece at 3�5 by 4�7. And all of these dimensions are on my blog that you can find in the description. If I click, you can find a link for it in the description. So after that white piece, I decided to do a piece of early espresso to create some contrast on the card. So I did a piece that was 3�3 by 4�5, which should give me a small 1/8 border from the white piece that I just put down. And now I'm going to do another white piece, but this one's going to be 3¼ by 4½. And I decide to leave a big margin before my next layer. And I'm going to come back later and emboss this bigger piece of white here. So before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and finish cutting all my other layers. And I'm going to come back to the early espresso and cut a 2¼ by 3½ inch piece. And you might notice that I need a new blade. Some of the edges are a little ragged, but I'll show you how I clean them up later. It's pretty easy because they're not that bad. But after the early espresso, I decide that I need a piece of patterned cardstock, and I wanted it to be mainly mint macaroon to go with the mint macaroon I used in the back. So I grabbed one of the pieces of the Birthday Bouquet Designer Series paper, which is new in the Occasions catalog, and I cut it to 2⅛ by 3�3. And because this is just a speckled background, it doesn't really matter the direction of it, so whatever way you want to cut it, but it will be matted nicely by that early espresso. So then I came back to early espresso again and did a 1�5 by 2�7 piece. You can see there are lots of layers. If you hear a kitty crying in the background, that's my cat Sirius, who is upset that I'm not paying attention to him right now. So I said this piece is 1�5 by 2�7, and it looks really tiny, but once you put the whole card together, it doesn't seem so small anymore. So then the final piece for the top is 1½ by 2�3/4 Whisper White cardstock. And I use the thick Whisper White for everything just because I just used one piece for the whole thing. But you certainly could use the lighter weight cardstock for the layers. So I decided I needed something like a belly band across it, so I cut another piece of early espresso, and it needs to be 3⅛ by 1�5. I actually cut it in the video at the beginning a little longer than that, and I end up having to cut it, make it a little smaller. So next, I'm sorry, it needs to be 3¼ by 1�5. And then I took another piece of Designer Series paper from the Birthday Bouquet set, and this one's directional, and I wanted it to go lengthways across, so I cut it at 3⅛ by 1½. So there's no side border, left or right border, but there's a border on the top and bottom of it. And you can see I put that right underneath that final white piece that was going to go on top. And that's the way I decided that I thought it looked best. So as I said before, I took the larger white piece and I embossed it with the decorative dots embossing folder that you can see in the upper left hand corner there. And it just gives a little bit of character to it. Okay, so now I'm going to speed this up quite a bit. This is like 4 times the way I did it. But now I'm just adhering all of my layers. I did use liquid glue to adhere every single layer that I showed you previously. And the reason why I used liquid glue was because I find it easier to gives me a little bit of time to wiggle the top piece to the mat so that it's evenly spaced all the way around the piece of cardstock that I'm layering. If I use tape, I don't have any time to wiggle it. It just sticks automatically. And I see people on YouTube all the time do that perfectly, but I am not so good at that. So I used liquid glue so that I was more likely to get my layers correct. And I'm almost done. I'm doing the largest white piece to the mint macaroon. Now, you can see I'm pressing it down. I think it already looks pretty like that, and I could have left it like that, but I, for some reason, was on a layering kick and decided to do a little bit more, and I wanted to bring a little bit more mint macaroon into it. So at this point, I was deciding whether I wanted to add dimensionals to any of these layers, but I decided against the dimensionals only because um, there's so many layers in this. It's pretty thick as it is. Uh, and I just decided it didn't need any dimensionals for these layers. I do add dimensionals for the sentiment later, but for right now, it's just these layers I figured was enough. How many layers is that? It's like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, like 10 layers. That's a lot of layers. But basically, it's like a quarter piece of mint macaroon, one piece of early espresso, one piece of thick whisper white. So I took the Botanical Builders framelits and I cut a flower out of mint macaroon and a center out of early espresso for the flower. This has got to be one of my favorite sets. And I used a die from the Project Life card collection framelit set and cut out a piece of whisper white from the smallest sentiment block. And I used the Happy Bloomin' Birthday sentiment from the Flower Patch stamp set. And since it's photopolymer, it's easy to stamp it in mint macaroon after I've die cut the piece. So I also use that same piece and die cut the same sentiment strip out of early espresso, and I cut it horizontally down the middle lengthwise. And now I'm adding a little bit of glue so that I can tape it to the bottom and make it look like I have another layer. Well, I do have another layer, but it's just not connected in the back, which you won't be able to see anyway, so it certainly doesn't matter. When I first did this, I thought I was going to do 4 pieces and do one on the left and the right, but it turns out that this sentiment is actually the exact width of the designer series paper that I used for the vertical stripes, so it doesn't need anything on the side because it's already going to look like it has sides when I put it on there. And you can see me wiggling things and deciding exactly where I want to put everything on the card right now because, as I said previously, I didn't plan it out, but that's part of the fun, right? Is just relaxing and playing with all your toys. But I did use dimensionals to adhere the Happy Bloomin' Birthday to the stamp set. Well, actually not the stamp set, but to the card. Right now I'm looking for the dimensionals, and that's why it doesn't look completely straight yet. But now that I found the dimensionals, I'm going to put 3 on the back, 2 on the sides, and 1 in the center of the sentiment strip. You can see that. And I love these little dimensionals, but I go through a lot of them because I love them. And then I'm centering that between the pieces so that it looks like it's the exact same width as the vertical designer series paper. And of course, my new favorite clear Wink of Stella glitter brush pen. I'm adding it to the flower and to the early espresso in center that you have here. Isn't this just a gorgeous flower? I love this set. I know I'm probably going to use it way too much. And I'm going to put a large pearl in the center of my flower because it wouldn't be complete without it. Just add a little bit of bling. I mean, this is a relatively simplistic card. It's very easy, but I think it has a very stunning quality to it with all the layers. And I think the early espresso really makes the light mint macaroon and whisper white pop. So now I'm adhering the largest mint macaroon layer to the card base of Whisper White. I like to do this last because if I mess up on something else, it's easier to fix if it's not attached to the final card yet. And now I'm just centering it. It should have about a quarter-inch margin all the way around the card. And that's it. So I hope you enjoyed this card. Please click the link in the description to follow the blog and get all the dimensions easily written out for you. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube page, please do so. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Thanks for stopping by.